Since the scheduled time has come, I'd like to call upon Chairman Dr. Kurokawa. This is the 9th meeting of NAIIC, and we'd like to convene the meeting to order. First of all, I would like to have the report of each of the working group. Working Group 1, Mr. Mitsuhiko Tanaka, please.
Allow me to be seated. And for the Working Group 1, that is accident investigation. So that is a task of Working Group number 1. And in our working group, the hearing vis-a-vis TEPCO has been conducted continuously. And the NISA, which is regulatory the agency, and also the nuclear the power, the manufacturers, and also for the safety analysis experts for earthquake and tsunami. And we have conducted the hearings and also exchange views and opinions together. And quite recently, in Kashiwazaki, Niigata Prefecture, BWR, the operators training center, that is a place for the simulation exercise, and actually we visited there. And also the documents which have been acquired, we continue to study on them. Thank you very much. Now, the working group number 2, Mr. Yokoyama, please. Thank you very much. I am Yokoyama. And the working group 2 is about the damage investigation. And in our working group, the health impact by the radiological the release that we have conducted our study, and the evacuation of the people and their life afterwards. And we went to the government office of Fukushima to conduct hearing, and also hearing with the government agencies have been conducted. And in a foreign investigation, and Mr. Hachizuka, the member, will explain Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Those are 3 countries which were affected by Chernobyl accident, and we visited those 3 countries in order to see the status of the damage by that accident. And so we'd like to reflect that the study results in our investigation. And those who were evacuated, and questionnaire was conducted, and as of April the 11th, 16,629 responses were received. And using that outcome, we'd like to conduct the analysis about the evacuation of the citizens and residents. And now, Mr. Sakurai, about working the group 3. I am Sakurai, thank you. And about working group 3, as you know, that is a policy investigation. And we are in charge of policy, the research. And as was the past, we have conducted hearing and also perform analysis about the documents and data. And in doing so, for Fukushima Prefecture, we conducted the hearing with the Fukushima, the prefecture, and off-site center, which is located within that prefecture. We actually visited the off-site center. And nuclear power regulation in Japan and abroad have been conducted. The study has been conducted on that. And as was already reported previously, overseas investigation, our working group also is responsible for that, and Mr. Oshima will report on that, about that particular matter. Thank you. The next about foreign investigation. Mr. Oshima, please. From April the 1st to the 10th of April, in order to see the international the safety, the measures and the emergency response. And also in 1986, the Chernobyl accident took place. And we'd like to see the damage after the accident. And we studied those damage in order to reflect that the study in our investigation results. And the teams were dispatched to 5 countries in Europe. And myself and Mr. Yokoyama for the first team, and Mr. Sakiyama and Mr. Hachizuka were in charge of the second team. And the first team went to France, Austria, and Ukraine. And the second team went to Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia, respectively. And about Ukraine, this was a joint study by 2 teams. And about France, the 58 units of the nuclear reactors were owned. So this was the second, the major, the countries after United States. 75 to 80% of the power was supplied from nuclear power generation. So the safety regulation in France was looked at, and the basic law was nuclear safety transparency law that was stipulated in 2006, and we decided to study the process of establishing that law and the current status of operation of that law. And for that purpose, the nuclear, the regulatory safety, the agency, and also we visited the Safety Institute of Nuclear Power, and the head of nuclear, the power authority, and the people related. We actually had an interview with them, and the nuclear, the power, the company in France. So we conducted the hearing with all of those people. In Paris, OECD, a nuclear the agency NEA is located, and we have the meeting. We had a meeting with the Secretary General, and also in Paris, that is Wano. Wano's the head. We conducted the hearing with him, and in Austria, IAEA, the Mr. Amano, the head of the IAEA, we had an interview with him, and for the emergency response, the center, the person responsible for that operation, we had an interview, and also in Vienna, the Nuclear Security Association, and with the Secretary General of that organization, we had a hearing. So it was the very the busy tour, but it was very productive tour. So in our the commission, the nuclear, the regulatory, the scheme and organization, we need to study them closely, and we believe that we are able to learn a great the lessons out of our visit, and all those information will be incorporated into our report, and we will continue to study all those matters. Thank you. So the investigation abroad, as was reported by Mr. Oshima, for the second the team, Ms. Hachiska, please, and Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine were visited. And the study in Ukraine, we jointly conducted the study with Team 1, and we actually studied from the 3 perspectives. The first. This is a common theme with Team 1, and that is a way to structure the response, the emergency response, the system. And second is health impact. Health impact on the next generation is also included. And thirdly, the impact on environment, and particularly the impact on agriculture. And those 3 the issues were addressed. And we learned a great deal out of our mission. But if I just give you an example, as a result of Chernobyl, the city called Pripyat, which was closely located to the Chernobyl, the power plant, and people actually evacuated, and we had opportunity to meet with those evacuees, and through the discussion with them, when they describe their story about the migration, I had a great empathy with their feeling, and I myself was actually the evacuee from the Fukushima power plant, and we could actually share the feeling together with the evacuees in Chernobyl. So I could understand their suffering, and they could understand my suffering. So we can share the very same feeling. And although 25 years have passed since the outbreak of the accident, they still remembered the lovely town, and they think about their hometown. And also health, the issue that facing them, I could have opportunity to listen to that directly. The first-hand information could be given to me. And the nuclear the disposal site, the waste disposal site that we visited, and the radioactive debris, they were managed intensely in a restricted area. So the impact of the damage has been prolonged. And agriculture in a contaminated area, if the good measures were taken, it is possible to produce agriculture goods which are not contaminated. I think we are able to learn out of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now then, having been reported, I would like to call upon the witness so that we shall raise questions to the witness. I'd like to have the witness, Mr. Fukano, to come into the room. NAIIC has made public the document pertaining to the technical knowledge about the nuclear accident in Fukushima nuclear power plants. And I'd like to call upon Director General of NAIIC, Mr. Fukano, to serve as a witness. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Fukano, as for the safety standards presented by the four ministers, as well as what NAIIC has issued in regard to the technical knowledge, which I would call upon as technical knowledge and expertise. In addition to this, there were some stress test-related issues, and I would want you to explain these matters in a way that's easy to understand for everybody. As we have informed you, Mr. Fukano is to have the first 15 minutes at the maximum. Mr. Fukano, please. This is Fukano, Director General of NAIIC. But before explaining, I would like to say the following, in which so many people are still suffering from many inconveniences and damages. And on part of the regulator, I would like to express my wholehearted understanding and regret to them. I'd like to explain in line with the document that we have issued, in which I would like to introduce what's stated in the document itself. In regard to the intent of this consideration, having experienced this accident, we would like to draw some lessons so that they would be made use to the assurance of the safety in the nuclear power plants in the future. Therefore, from the time of the occurrence of the accident, we looked at all the events and summarized them from the technical perspective. And you do see the members in which we have interviewed, but this is the responsibility of NAIIC, in which we have compiled this document itself. Please look at page 2 of your handout, in which we had 8 meetings in total to listen to the opinions, in which we have heard different views. And if you look at the 4th page, here we see the progress of the events, and you see how we view it. First of all, there was the earthquake, which was resulting in an automatic stoppage of the nuclear reactors. At this point, the emergency diesel engines did provide electricity so that the cooling was carried out for the core of the reactor. But since the tsunami that took place thereafter, almost all the electricity was no longer being supplied from the emergency diesel generator as well as to the distributors. There were some cooling, which could be resorted to without use of electricity, which was used for some time. But soon after, this has also stopped, so that we have lost all power and we were not able to cool the reactor thereafter. That is the progress of the events. We have tried to inject water, but despite that, in the end, there was unfortunate release of the radioactive substances to the outside, as well as hydrogen explosion that has taken place thereafter. With the different kinds of reactor, starting with number 1 unit, it was relatively early that this has taken place. And for number 2 and number 3 units, we were able to cool on a tentative basis for some time. But thereafter, there was a stoppage of the cooling. So depending upon which unit, the situation is slightly different. And at each of the phases, we have carried out the evaluation in which we have looked at some of the technical issues, in which we looked at what technical countermeasures that can be taken thereafter. This is the overall picture. And first of all, this is the first event in which we lost the external power. As you see here in the slide, at the Fukushima Daiichi, the supply of electricity from the outside was stopped because of the earthquake, in which it was not possible to supply the electricity from the outside electric power sources. And the steel tower for transmission was damaged. And in addition, there was the damage of the other overhead transmission systems, which resulted in the disruption of the power supply. At this time, there were effects in other power plants, and there were 22 lines for the external power supply, of which 19 were not able to supply electricity any longer, in which there was massive damage to the supply of electricity from the outside.
This is just an example of damage, and you can see the power, the steel power that was collapsed, and the steel tower had a earthquake resistant, but the soil was quite fragile, and there were no the fall collapse of the steel tower because of the lack of anti-seismic quality. And so, about external power source, what we should have done. And as you can see, in order to increase reliability, the several measures must be taken. And if the system collapses, we should have alternative route to supply the electricity. And because the insulation is quite fragile, so that should be reinforced, and also the switch. And because of the fragile insulation, that was quite fragile as well. And when the power stoppage occurred, which was the source of the problem, we should be able to identify the source of the problem. But we should not use the assumption that the external power source was always available. And we have to eliminate that assumption in order to strengthen our system. But we really need to reinforce external the power supply system. And the breaker, the first insulation was adversely affected, but that used the gas, and gas seems to be quite strong against a disaster. So that needs to be used. And also the switching station facility inside the power plant, and they were widely affected. And for instance, the majority of the facilities and equipment were flooded, and some which were not. If the power distribution, the system is affected, it is no longer they were no longer used. And diesel generator, unit number 6, that partly survived. And there was high pressure, the switchboard or distribution the board, and for that reason, the power supply could be obtained. And actually, for number 2 and number 4, air-cooled the system was the available. However, there was no high pressure the switchboard, and for that reason, it could not function. And the direct the current the power source, in order to operate the valve, it is important. And except for the unit 3, 5, and 6, they were dipped under the water, and so could not used anymore. And so it is very important to have a physical dispersion of those facilities, and the anti-flood the system should be reinforced. And we should have a multiple the hedge and water cooled, since there is the heat exchange with sea. And so we should have the air the cooling system as well, in addition to the water cooling system. And furthermore, direct current is important, that I said, and the capacity of battery needs to increase so that we can maintain the functionality of the direct current. And also dedicated power source should be installed and make it easy to supply the power from outside. And so we should have a port for that. And those are just examples. And the next, I would like to give you the cooling system.
This, I would say, to be the most important to avoid the severe accidents. And here, because of the tsunami, all the AC electricity was suspended, so that whatever is to resort to electricity was not operable. At the same time, heat exchange with the salt seawater was not possible because you need to discharge the heat. But basically, it was not possible to discharge the heat any longer as a result. Thus, for 1, 2, 3 units respectively, we had the system not to use the electricity. Thus, for number 2 and number 3, they were in operation for some time. For number 1 unit, at the early stage, the function did stop, and as a result, we were not able to cool this. And in the end, there was the damage to the core. There are a number of examples, starting with number 1 unit I'd like to talk about, in which there is a big heat exchanger which looks like a tank. And within the tank, there are the pipings for heat exchange. And the water within the pump are going to be discharged with the heat. However, though this equipment was available, the valve closed when there was lossage of the DC electricity because of the fail-safe mechanism in which it was not possible to use it at the early stage. However, we thought that this was still operable, and because we were not able to look at the temperature nor the pressure, that's why we were late in responding to this. In regard to number 2 and number 3 units, the situation is slightly different from what I've just elaborated. We use the steam so as to run the turbine, and that's how we would get the water supply. But in number 2 unit as well, we were able to cool for the first 3 days or so. However, for the number 2 unit, PCV had a relatively low pressure, and when it was vented out, there is a way to open the vents, and maybe that was the reason why it was not possible to vent out as well. For number 3, there is also the steam turbines in which we would supply the water. At one point, the pressure did lower as a result of this usage, but this was manually stopped. And as a result, we opened another valve and tried to lower the pressure and inject the water, but this did not succeed, which resulted in heightening of the pressure so that the water cannot be supplied to where there is high pressure. And that's why there was the meltdown. And as I have just said, the core was at the high temperature, but how do you reduce the pressure so as to inject the water ASAP is very important. You need to have the right manuals as well as the right judgments to be made ASAP. and the cooling system should not be submerged in water. So you need to have measures against submergence. And in the end, you need to discharge the heat somewhere. And we need to have various ways to do so. And the operation of the valves should be made more sure, even if there is no supply of electricity. And these measures, I believe, are also necessary. In addition, in the end, we are going to discharge the heater into the ocean, and there is the need for extra pumps. And in addition, for the spent fuel pool, it is necessary to enhance the reliability by having the cooling and water supply functions. I'm going to skip some of the parts, but let me talk about the containment. Once the containment is not possible,
and inside the containment vessel, temperature rose, and the radioactive material was accumulated there. And about this, the lack of containment inside the containment vessel, if that was released to outside, radioactive material was released to the outside. And in our accident, that actually happened. And why this happened? And what was the mechanism to allow the emission to the outside, and how the hydrogen was released to the outside? And about this, about the building, the dose level was measured, and the unit number 2, we could measure that. And the floor, the dose level is quite high. And the number 2, it seems that from the top, the area, the hydrogen was released. And in the lower the floors, the hydrogen was also detected. And in the interest of time, I could not explain in details. But the seal part was overheated, and that was broken. And from that part, the hydrogen was released to the outside. Radioactive material was released outside. And I'm aware of the time constraint, so I have to skip many things. But about those things, so the seal should be fully maintained, even with overheated the condition, in order to prevent the outflow. And lastly, that is the measurement equipment with the collapse of measurement, the equipment are very difficult to measure anymore.
Let me cite some of the conclusions. Because of the factors I've mentioned, the countermeasures which are cited here are necessary, and they should be reflected in new sets of regulations that would come into play. In other words, at all times, we should consider this so as to further enhance the safety through the systems. Many of the countermeasures are already executed outside of Japan, so we need to draw some lessons from what's being done outside of Japan. In addition, I do talk about denial of the previous phase, so you need to accept the fact that at times you need to deny the phase before the present phase, and especially for severe accidents like this, it is extremely important for us to consider some of these countermeasures which were not in place before. And the new regulatory body will be implementing these countermeasures, and on part of NISA, we are collecting and summarizing the data so as to enable that. And there are some 30 countermeasures that we have come up with, and we believe that as a result, it would further enhance the safety than what it is today. You were within the time limit on April the 6th. For the restart of the nuclear power plants, there was the judgment by the 4 ministers which was issued. Can you refer to this very briefly? Yes, there is a document that's been distributed to you, which is the criteria for judgment regarding safety for reoperation of the nuclear power plants. There are 3 criteria, basically. And please refer to page 6, where it says Standard 1 or Criteria 1. When all the power sources were lost due to earthquake and or tsunami, we need to incorporate the safety measures as mentioned earlier. And page 8 has the second criteria. By incorporating the measures mentioned, we hope that even should there be earthquake and tsunami that hit Fukushima Daiichi, we do hope that there shan't be repetition of the damage of the core as we have experienced. And we need to be able to verify that. That's criteria 2. This is evaluated in the first phase of the stress test, but there's also criteria 3. And if you refer to the following page, that's page 9. In regard to the countermeasures mentioned, at the Fukushima Daiichi of TEPCO, the core was damaged, and because of the earthquake and tsunami, there has been the damage to the core, resulting in the release of radioactive substances. So we need to have the countermeasures to avoid such a damage in the first place. In addition, in order to further enhance the safety is a must. It means that we should not stand still, but further endeavor to enhance the countermeasures. They are incorporated into the 30 countermeasures, especially the countermeasures to be taken after the damage of the core, as well as other countermeasures which are going to be making improvement to the equipments and facilities. We need to further enhance the reliability, which is something to be carried out together with the operator. That's criteria 3. In any case, as for the technical knowledge and expertise that we have come up with, this is a basic position. If I may be allowed to add another point, these are the countermeasures which were accumulated since last year. And in the very last page, you see what NISA has been doing since last year. After the earthquake last year, we have equipped the mobile power source, as well as to have other emergency measures which can be incorporated. In addition, we have summarized some of the knowledge and expertise since last year. And what is necessary is to summarize all these countermeasures so as to present the criteria that I just have done so. Thank you very much. Thank you. Since last year, you have made the preparation on part of NISA so as to enhance the role on part of NISA, and you said it's important not to have a standstill, but continue to endeavor. So we would like to hear your comments on a number of issues. At NAIC, Mr. Terasaka, Mr. Hirose from NISA, and as well as the chair of the NSC have been convened to serve as a witness at this NAIC. And so far, the safety of nuclear power plants were spoken by the Director Generals of the NISA in the past. And there could be some questions which could be expected beforehand. And I don't know whether you are prepared for some. But anytime when we talk about the assuring the safety of the nuclear power plants, at times we felt that not necessarily that some of the responses were sincere. It's not our judgment, but rather the judgment on part of the public and the mass. But you have said that you have been implementing the countermeasures since last year, which have been totaling 30 in total. And without fail, you said you plan to implement all of them. But according to the past DGs of NISA, we get the impression as though they were not necessarily sincere at times. And if that is true, we might have to call upon you once again as the witness in the near future. Since you are here as a witness, I do hope that you shall be sincere on part of NISA as well as DG of NISA. Is that going to be your position, Mr. Fukano? Yes, says Mr. Fukano. Then I would like to start. What is the purpose of establishing NISA in the first place? we have been entrusted by the public so as to secure the safety of the nuclear power plants in which we are to put in force the regulations. As a result, we like to prevent any negatives from the nuclear power plants. That is a mission on part of NISA. I'd like to confirm. In regard to the law that talks about the establishment of NISA under METI, it does talk about securing the energy to be generated by nuclear power plants, but it is the NISA's responsibility to assure the safety of the nuclear power plants as well. What about the health and safety of the public? And what about avoiding any negative effects to be exposed to the people? Is that included in NISA's mission? We are under the law, although it doesn't spell out explicitly in the law, but we believe that the position of NISA is that we like to prevent any damage from the nuclear power plants so that we shall be able to protect the health and the environment. Is that being shared by all the members of NISA? Yes, I believe so. Thank you. If that is true, on part of NISA, on March the 28th, TEPCO's nuclear power plant number 1 unit technical knowledge. There has been massive release of the radioactive substances, and NISA has reason for deep regretting this fact that there has been release. Did you analyze this yourself? And as an organization of NISA, do you believe that there have been some problem with the human resources? And do you have anything to explain to those who have suffered, namely the Japanese public? In 2001, we have established NISA, and at that time, I was involved in the establishment of NISA back in 2001. At that time, we wanted to clarify the mission of NISA, and in order to do so, I believe it's the first time at METI, but 4 basic philosophy or missions were drafted in which I was heavily involved myself. So we needed to make sure what we were going to strive for. That was made clear. And at the same time, we wanted to have the resources who would have the expertise to be able to implement that. Therefore, we believe we have worked hard to train the people as well. However, with the result we see at present, I do regret wholeheartedly, personally. And in the end, it boils down to how much expertise do you have, and on a day-to-day basis, how much can each individual will be able to respond to emergency. In the end, I must say did not work well, and there is so much reflection that we need to make on part of NISA. Having said that, and amidst this situation, what is important is that there needs to be a career path to be established for the members of NISA. In addition, there needs to be training programs so that someone to be in this position would have to go through certain training and to have certain level of expertise. This kind of program was in place, we believe, but by looking at the outcome we have experienced, I guess we were not able to fulfill what we thought we were doing, and I do regret that we weren't able to do it to the satisfaction. Hachitsuka speaking. Okumamachi and Futaba town, these are the towns that have been damaged. And have you looked at them and come to the conclusion, having visited those 2 towns? Since I was appointed as the DG of NISA, I did meet the governor because I thought I should. So immediately after assuming the DG of NISA, I visited the prefectural government. And in addition, I felt that I need to see the site itself. So more or less at the same time frame, I went to the sites. Naturally, in this, the nuclear power plant, which went through the accident, was visited, and I did have discussions with the person responsible for that. I also visited the Fukushima Prefectural Assembly so that we had more or less an opportunity to meet the members of the Fukushima Prefectural Assembly. And I did explain to the members of the assemblies So at the prefectural assembly, you did explain. I did hear about that in passing. But what about Okuma town? Did you visit there? Did you see the site of Okuma? On my way to the site, we went by Okuma town, but due to the limited time, it's not that we spent enough time in visiting Okuma town. Let me switch gear. Safety of the people and to assure this health of the people in coming out with the safety criteria, there was a delay in the evacuation, and some of the evacuees had to relocate from one evacuation center to the next without their understanding. I don't think it's proper to move ahead with the kind of conclusion you've drawn. So what is your position on that in regard to the safety and the health of the people? I would agree that there's so much for us to reflect in regard to what you have pointed out. And we need to consider the accident deeply, and at the same time to consider what countermeasures would be possible. We believe that we have considered the possible countermeasures to be implemented. On the other hand, in regard to evacuation that you've asked, Ms. Commissioner, this again is equally important, and together with assuring the safety of the evacuation of the center, that also needs to be looked at. For the evacuation of the public, as well as some of the defects that we have experienced in our countermeasures, we like to think through so that never again should it be repeated. I believe such countermeasures are equally important. One of the major points we've reflected is that NAIIC is to serve as a hub of information should anything like this is to occur, but we were not able to serve the role as a hub of information. For one, there were some disruption of the telecommunication equipments which disallowed us to get the information in part, but we should be prepared for such disruption of the communication system. What should we do to continue to have the communication system in place? We were acting in a different venue from the Prime Minister's office, but in a very serious situation like this, we won't be able to act sufficiently. So reflecting from this, a small team from NAIIC would relocate ourselves to the Prime Minister's office so that we shall be able to make the necessary instruction from the Prime Minister's office. And we believe that this will be a better way, and we are making preparations to be able to do so. In addition, at the site, the evacuation did not go well. Thus, NAIIC at NSC is looking at it so that if something does take place like this, immediately we're going to ask people within the radius of 5 kilometers, which is the notion of PAZ. So it is going to be NSC's guideline which needs to be revised. But if we are to implement PAZ, we are going to have the right measures. And the offsite center did not function well as well. So different kinds of countermeasures are going to be necessary.
Setting the technical issue aside, the evacuation plan should be the part of your the responsibility. The local the governments primarily are responsible for evacuation the plan, but we also help that. But PAZ, I think that much was discussed for a long time, and you have been involved in the NAIIC since its foundation. Of course, you worked for energy, the Energy Agency as well, but what kind of the improvement you plan for PAZ? That we are very sorry that this accident happened and evacuation, etc. And the IAEA, that discussion has been underway for a long time, and we should have made the more attention to that. And so, for the lack of our attention, that we reflected that quite deeply, and not only this matter, our countermeasures about all the severe accidents, we were too inward-looking. And together with IAEA, for instance, we could study together the countermeasures, the quite advanced ones. So we should have been involved from earlier phase, but that efforts have been lacking. We were too inward looking. So the PSZ, you didn't support PSZ effectively, as Mr. Hirose said. What was the reason? Although study was conducted about PSZ, and we didn't pay sufficient attention to that. You knew the existence of PSZ. Yes, we did. We knew that that study was underway. And are you involved? Do you join a PSZ? Yes, we do. And evacuation is also included. And so, do you actually incorporate all those measures? You talked about 30 measures, and you share with us. And PSZ and offsite center were not included in 30 measures. And those are all technical, the measures about nuclear power plants. So those two issues were not included. Not here, but at NISA, going forward, for the new regulatory system, in order to prepare that, we made a lot of studies, and that the preventional, the measures were included. Were those the study open? Yes, with a 4 ministers meeting. I think that's the 5th round of the meeting with 4 ministers, and during that time, the NISA presented the review about disaster prevention, and that program was presented, and that was opened, the document. And you have a deadline for your roadmap. Yes, what we have to do right now, and the additional measures that plan to be implemented additionally were all put in place. And that has been the study at the Nuclear the Safety Commission as well. Can I clarify one point? Under that roadmap, what you have to do immediately, that is all the measures you have to take before the restart of the nuclear power plant. I think it has not linked directly to the restarting of the nuclear power plant. We have to do everything in parallel. And there are many things you have to reflect. And in addition to 30 measures, there are so many things you have to do. But people pay attention to the restart of the nuclear power plant operation. So before the restart, you take the measures that you can take. And then you move into the phase of restart. And restart and the disaster prevention, they are not directly linked. Those two, the measures must be taken in parallel. And so you have a lot of discussions about restart. And the criteria were shown by 4 ministers. And if the operation meets those 4 criteria, they're ready for restart. But prior to that, the points of NISA, are there any, the measures you immediately take before the restart of the power plant? And at NISA, before the restarting the nuclear power, the plant's operation, are there any? Just answer me. There are measures or not? You talked about the improvement of off-site center, or you also talked about PSZ. And about the measures, according to your schedule, the restarting, the schedule was already shown. But are you going to implement all those measures before the restart? We do not explicitly show that we take measures before the restart. In other words, when you say in parallel, after restart, you actually rather slowly take measures. Well, we'd like to do it as quickly as possible, but does not mean that we can complete all the measures before the restart. Can I explain? You talked about 30 technical measures. But in addition to that, For the restart of nuclear the power plant, there was the criteria, and on the 6th of April, the 4 ministers, including Prime Minister, presented that. And if the criteria are met, the nuclear power plant is ready to restart. And in doing so, Mr. Fukano joined the meeting by 4 ministers. Yes, as a presenter, I sometimes joined the meeting, but just as a presenter. So when the discussion was held among the 4 ministers, I must leave the room. So that was not regulatory rule. That was the very difficult to define regulatory rule. This is not based on law. That is the part of administrative guidance, in my understanding. And if you look at page 6, you can see the introductory part prior to the criteria. And to require the operators to actually observe the level of safety above the legally required level. So that is the part of administrative guidance. And there are 3 criteria that you already explained to us. And up until the time of restart, the criteria 1 and 2 must be met before the restart. And the 3rd criteria that needs to be confirmed before the restart. But about the 3rd criteria, not the facilities are required. The operator should have a plan, including that facility plan, and that plan should be presented clearly from the operator. And 3rd, the criteria, the operators are they're required to submit the plan. But other 2, there were no need for them to implement them before the restart. And you talked about 30 the measures, but for instance, I think you were in a hurry toward the end, very difficult for you to understand. But the number 1 to number 4, that is securing the power supply. And you said that that was a critical part. And that is based on the lesson out of the accident. In other words, try to secure the external power source. And that is of great importance. And for that reason, that comes at the top of the measures. And which are those measures? Which criteria those measures belong to? Does not necessarily belong to the criteria 1 only. And some belong to the criteria number 3. But in any case, external power source. Our assumption is we are not able to secure that, and still the safety must be ensured. So belong to number 3, the criteria. So in other words, in future, the operators should submit a plan to ensure the external power source. And once that criteria is met, the restart is allowed. And so NISA approves that. When the criteria were formulated, yes, we involved. So we approved that. The misunderstanding seems to arise here. There is no priority of importance. Just the matter of the procedure, the criteria 1 does not mean that that is the most important criteria in order to avoid misunderstanding.
We are investigating the accident at this time, and in our investigation of the accident, this is one of the items which has quite high a priority as we see it. So are you saying that your position is different from our perspective? Well, all of the items listed here are all important, and if all of the items are assured, we can avoid the accident becoming serious, so they shall be useful. In that sense, we consider all of them to be important. But just because it's listed as measure 1, it doesn't mean it's the highest of the highest priority. So it's okay to say that all the importance is more or less at the high level. But in regard to securing the power source, you have come to the judgment that it will be left in the hands of the operators, and that is approved by NISA. This is criteria 3 at this point of time. But these criteria are going to be reviewed once the new regulatory agency is in place, and they will be incorporated at the end as part of the regulations to be issued. I understand that, but in regard to criteria that you have shown us, these are the criteria to decide whether the nuclear power plants will be restarted or not. So if something doesn't have to be done before the restart of the operation, then it's going to take place thereafter. But let me ask some questions about the causes of the accident. In regard to your technical knowledge and expertise that you have compiled, is the following your position? What is the cause of this accident? You want to define that first. And should the same reoccur, you would like to have countermeasures so as to avoid the reoccurrence. That was the focus of the countermeasures, and they are incorporated in criteria 1. And once the accident actually does take place, then in the first level of evaluation through the stress test, that will be the second level of criteria. So identification of the cause is the first step. And should the same phenomena take place in the future, you have incorporated the measures to avoid the reoccurrence of what we experienced this time. Am I right? In regard to criteria 1, with the phenomena of earthquake and tsunami, there was the damage to the core which has resulted, and they are incorporated in criteria 1. And criteria 2 would check whether those measures are actually taking place. On part of NISA, as for the cause, to what extent do you think you have identified the causes quantitatively as expressed in percentage? It would be difficult to express in quantitative manner, and the radioactive substances have contaminated units 1 to 4, so you cannot go inside. So for reality, we haven't seen the actual inside of the respective units as of yet. We are making the best use of the information available at present and analyzing them so that we believe to scrutinize what would have the high probability of occurrence. So some of the causes are unclear. Is that true? When you say unclear or unknown, I don't know whether those will be the appropriate way of expressing them. But if you ask me whether we would have to limit the cause to this and that reason alone, we need to look at the inside of the unit to confirm. However, with quite high level of probability, we believe that we are able to assume as to what has actually happened. Here, what you see here is number of phenomena cited in your documents. And in this document, it says there are things which need to be clarified in the future, and there are also other things which are not as clear at this point of time. These are the words you have used in your document. There are many examples, so I can choose different pages. Here, again, it says that the analysis will be carried out in the future. Thus, for the analysis of the causes are left in part quite substantially as a future work to be conducted. So is it true to understand that the causes are not fully analyzed as of yet? Or is it that despite the fact that you express it this way, you have identified the causes so as to come up with the necessary countermeasures? I believe that we have enough materials and information to come up with the countermeasures. It's true that we haven't actually seen the site, and to compensate that, we have carried out analysis, and we have looked at the parameters at the plant, which have been reviewed by the experts. So we have compiled the evaluation at this point of time. And based upon that, we believe that we can come up with some countermeasures. May I? In regard to the cause of the accident, there are a number of questions I'd like to raise you. My name is Tanaka. in regard to this technical knowledge and expertise compiled as of March the 28th, I've read through the document, and it talks about the observation of the earthquake and the earthquake motions. And as for the major equipments and devices which are important for safety, you talk about what needs to be done. And thereafter, in the document, what's about the seismic motion or behavior? They have not been observed to the fullest because there has been stoppage of the data recording. And it's not just the stress that you should look at, but there are other points you need to look at. At the low cycle, metal fatigue could be one possibility as to what has happened in reality. In addition to that, there could be others. And it's not that you've reviewed for all the major equipments. And for the major equipments, it may not be the case that you have addressed all the possible issues fully. So for the major equipments which are important to assure the safety, what is the basis in spelling out the conclusion you've cited in the document? From number 1 to number 4 units, we haven't seen the actual units with our own eyes as of yet. At Kashiwazaki Kariya power plant, we are not able to carry out the detailed confirmation we did at Kashiwazaki Kariya. However, having said that, in regard to the seismic back-check measures that we have resorted to in the past, we have analyzed the seismic motions and response for the major seismic response. They are within the scope of the evaluation. We need to further expand the scope. And to use number 5 unit as one example, then some have exceeded the number set forth in our evaluation. So in number 5 unit, we can go inside number 5 unit. We shall actually do that and to see what have exceeded the criteria. And such work is underway at the moment. As for the seismic evaluation, I have the feeling, and I'm asking the question, that's not done sufficiently. What is the basis for you saying it is being done sufficiently? Well, having looked at the seismic behavior that we have experienced this time, we have analyzed the responses. And as a result, we were able to confirm that they have not exceeded the evaluation. For some of the seismic responses or behaviors, they have been suspended in regard to the recording. For others, they have been recorded. Therefore, we are evaluating what effect, if any, there is. However, we have concluded it's not a major impact posed. This is not designing. We are talking about analyzing of an accident. For example, within the PCV, you don't know what has taken place. Well, for the piping, to look at the integrity of the piping, if you assume all the other equipments to be assured with the integrity, that's a different story. But to look at the cause of the accident, you need to look at support equipments and other devices. It may be that this equipment is not connected or this board has been detached. As an example, you need to nail down each and every one of these to look at the analysis of the event tree, because that's one way of analyzing the accident. But I have the feeling you haven't done so. As you have pointed out, it's not that we have carried out the analysis based upon the event tree, but for the major support equipments, at least for the major ones. We have looked at the response analysis so as to see what the result is.
So as is written in technological the knowledge, the area where the phenomena are fully elucidated, as there are still those areas remain in your report. As I said earlier, we couldn't analyze everything yet. And so there is still the lack of clarity in many aspects. However, the data related to the plant and based on our analysis data about earthquake, quite unlikely that earthquake itself damaged the safety, the quality. And then the tsunami that hit the plant, and the many equipment was damaged, and the many of the switchboard functions were malfunctional. And so those were the damage caused by tsunami. And what kind of measures we could take? I think we do have to think about them. And so the gray zone that should be identified in order to have the thorough safety measures. Making distinction black and white, that will lead to the failure of some of areas for the safety. But based on that, the temporary the evaluation, the safety, the criteria were shown by for the ministers from number 1 to number 4. Do you think that is acceptable? And such the disaster occurred, and in order to avoid and prevent the severe the fuel the damage. We set up the standards to prevent the severe accident, and in order to enhance the safety. So for that reason, those criteria were set up. And I believe that in that sense, the evaluation is quite helpful. And I don't share the same the interpretation. And the safety and what happens in the containment vessel are linked. But I think you just quite choose what works good for you only. And in Fukushima accident, what we have to learn from the people's perspective is that in future, if there is a major the earthquake down below, or fire and crash of the airplanes or terrorism, you also have to take steps against all those disasters. And the measure. You try to narrow down the cause of the accidents, and about those the causes which are narrowed down, about that you try to take countermeasures. And from the people's perspective, I think that is not desirable way. What do you think, Mr. Fukano? In order to prevent what happened last year, we have to set up the measures. And the final judgment was given by the political level. And report about the technological evaluation, that alone does not suffice. And I talked about, we always deny the assumption made in a previous phase, and the safety, the culture should progress constantly. And in the report, we touch upon that necessity and about severe accident. In addition to those, we really have to consider other possibilities as well. And this report is the bottom-up based on the accident, but top-down approach is also important. 2006, there was instruction about the earthquake, and then back check. The back check, you checked all the reactors? Yes. The instruction was given to all the reactors, and we conducted inspection, but the time transpired. And as a result of back check, the results were all right. And did you follow the results? In those days, I was Deputy Director General, and back check instruction was already completed. The work was already completed. And it took too long time. And at NAIIC, we thought that new structure should be set up in order to quicken the pace. So you could push the pace to the faster. So instruction about backcheck, whether backcheck was actually implemented was important rather than just giving instruction. And in Fukushima, the #1 power plant, backcheck was not completed, was not implemented. That was not implemented. That was known to everybody. And so if you try to identify the cause, only with the earthquake, certain damage took place. And if that was the case, do you think that this evaluation could change? Very difficult to answer that question. And about earthquake, as you criticize, the back check is quite imminent. We do it as quickly as possible. If the measure against earthquake is not sufficient, we have to improve our measures against the earthquake. And the criteria #2, stress test, how far the plant is safe against earthquake, re-evaluation is currently conducted. And for our assumption, the 1.8 times higher safety should be ensured. And if even severe the tremor occurs, the safety margin should be further expanded. So you conduct the back check as a result of the earthquake last year. But the action is suspended because evaluation is made by stress test already. And anti-earthquake, the back check has been underway in parallel. And after the earthquake last year, because we were too busy dealing with the disaster, so it was suspended, but that was restarted again. And based on the lesson we learned out of the earthquake, in order to reflect all the knowledge in the new measures, that program is also underway. And backcheck of earthquake, is that condition for restart of nuclear power plant operation? It is delinked from the stress test. But as a result of earthquake back check, if the even more strict standard is needed and the safety margin is compromised, in that case will adversely affect the timing of restart. So the condition is back check should be implemented. So we always refer to the result of back check. So is it the condition that in order to restart the power plant, the back check must be completed? No, that is not. But we always refer to the results of the back check. So in that the region, so since you are the head of the government agency, just say that you do it in parallel and just refer to that. Rather than saying that, since that is rule, you should abide by the rule. And if the back check is not completed, does not meet the criteria, so restart is not possible. Or even back check is not completed, you already evaluate the tremor level, so restart is possible. The stress test is delinked from the back check. As the condition for restart, back check is the essential. The completion of the back check is not essential for restart, but always we look at the results of back check in order to consider the restart. And the way the standard is formed, you have to define the cause of the accident, and then based on that, the cause, you formulate the countermeasures. I think you narrow down the cause of the accident. Based on that narrow analysis, countermeasures were thought. And as Mr. Tanaka said, the cause of the accident is not confined to the tsunami. And for instance, this technological or technical the knowledge, the much is discussed as to whether there is any the impact of earthquake that remains to be evaluated going forward, and that is written many places. So still there is a lack of clarity here, and the anti-seismic measure that is not incorporated into the condition of the restart. Why that is so? In that sense, for anti-seismic, we look at the margin. And if there is a sufficient margin, we make judgment based on that. And the stress test, before the stress test begins, the NISA always look at the seismic, the anti-seismic level. And you said that the policy has continued. And so that past policy and the condition for restart. And for restart, you only use the stress test in order to allow the restart. I think that is not consistent. And for the safety of nuclear power plant, it should not be determined by severe accident. And back check in order to prevent the severe accident is necessary. And your approach is only to overcome the severe accident. And that is used as condition for restart. I think that is not appropriate. And perhaps my statement was misleading. The severe accident and the damage of the fuel, in order to avoid that from happening, we have to take steps in advance in order to prevent that from happening, and that needs to be confirmed. So to meet the criteria and criteria 2 should be met. So prior to the severe accident, for the ordinary level of earthquake, whether the plant withstands the ordinary level of earthquake, I think that is a back check. And why you do not include that in the condition for restart. The back check, as I said, we have to do it. But stress test, apart from the back check, the stress test is also carried out. And what is the margin, safety margin, in terms of anti-seismic? We look at that. In a backup, the process, if there is any linkage between the two faults, if the margin is compromised, in that case, the further check is necessary. And as a result, if the safety margin is destroyed, the stress test, the results would not be success. And so I think many people now understand the NISA. The stress test has finally emerged because the Prime Minister emphasized that. And that has been taken as the condition of restarting. But prior to that, based on the lesson from Chuetsu earthquake, the anti-seismic back check should be implemented in order to reinforce anti-seismic quality, and that was the most important measure that the NISA emphasized. So if you define the cause, and the last year's event, partly the damage was caused by the earthquake. And of course, to a large extent, that damage occurred as a result of tsunami. And in order to set up the standard, not only the tsunami countermeasures, the earthquake countermeasures should be incorporated. I think that should be the way standards were set. But in the 30, the measures, this was not included. So why this is so? Why the technological or technical, the standard underwent the changes, and up to then you emphasize the importance of anti-seismic measure. Why the 30 measures do not include anti-seismic measures?
For anti-seismic or seismic, it may be a problem with how we have structured our consideration. No. You have identified the cause not to be of the earthquake, and because you have defined so, and that's something that's not made clear in our verification efforts. So I'm asking why you identified that the cause was not earthquake, and to what extent do you have the confidence in regard to your conclusion? You said that it could not be expressed in percentage, and you said it must be so, but that would only put people into anxiety. In this process, why is it that seismic efforts are not included as a precondition for the restart? Why did you specify that the cause was tsunami rather than the earthquake? All the Japanese feel that to be somewhat odd. Why is it that you have come to such a conclusion? It's not that earthquake is not included. Earthquake is included in the stress test so as to see how much margin you have in terms of their seismic nature. In that sense, earthquake is included together with tsunami as important factors in the stress test. However, they have taken place simultaneously, and tsunami would result as a result of earthquake. And the precondition was that tsunami would follow the earthquake, and we wanted to see whether we shall be able to avoid the reoccurrence. So earthquakes are included. But in regard to the seismic backcheck, you need to look at the geology of the surrounding area. For example, this fault is connected to this fault or that fault, and you need to carry out that kind of analysis, which is underway at present. And as a result, there could be simultaneous movement of the fault, which would result in more severe earthquake. If so, that result would have to be reflected in the stress test. You said that there are two causes. So is it true to understand that you have assumed two causes? If that is true, it seems that the countermeasures are not included in the 30 items listed for the earthquake related. You said that they were confirmed in the stress test. It's not just confirmation. If it's confirmed, then the countermeasures would have to be incorporated into the 30 items. And if you have done so, the preconditions for the restart would have become different. There is no way to go ahead in just repeating our discussions on this point. But so far, you have identified the cause and incorporated the countermeasures. And that's the basis in coming up with this list. But to the extent that we have verified as the Commission, there could be other causes in which they have worked in a complex manner with each other. That's why, as a result, it has resulted in a major damage. One example is that the issue of the evacuation of the local community or the issue of securing safety of the local citizens. These issues would have to be looked at within the overall picture to come up with the sets of countermeasures. But in regard to this technical knowledge, it's not included in the 30 items, but it's written in the back of this document because you have noticed this. But as you see, what's presented in the slide, you said this is a bottom-up effort to come to this. Thus, you have not come to look at it on a systematic manner, to look at the issue from the holistic view. Having said that, I'd like to raise the following question. In regard to this accident, I'm talking about the accident of 311 at Fukushima. The off-site center was not functional at all. Would you agree to that? Unfortunately, there was disruption of the communication and other reasons. So off-site center was not fully functional, as you say. The issues related to the off-site center, are they included in the 30 items listed here? The 30 items listed here, as I said earlier, are the technical consideration as the result of looking at the power plant. So it's not included in the 30 items. Now, I'd like to confirm, NAIIC has presented this list of 30 items. There are important issues which are not included in this 30 items. And in terms of the safety criteria for the restart of the operation, there were only 15 out of the 30 items which were the subject. In other words, NAIIC has said 30 is important, but all the 30 items are not included in the criteria of judgment. But you said you have accepted that. So it's only mere 15 out of the total 30. But in addition, outside of the 30 items, there are also important items which are not included in the 30 items. When I asked about this earlier, you said they would be carried out in parallel. However, you said this is not linked as one of the preconditions for the restart of the power plant. There is a possibility of the restart of the power plant. I believe that the possibility of improvements to be made in the off-site center would be low. Am I right? We have asked the site, and we are going to launch the countermeasures as much as possible. If you are going to rebuild the hardware, then it would take much time to do so in total. So within the facilities and equipments available, they are to implement the countermeasures as soon as possible. Oh, you said that it takes time to rebuild the hardware, so they are not included in 30 items. That's how I have understood your response. The off-site center is not included in the 30 items for the disaster prevention, as mentioned earlier. This is different from the process for the restart, and it is an effort that's carried out in parallel. Let me confirm once again, there are a number of hardwares which would have to be rebuilt. For one, for example, a seismic proof buildings, and there are others which are all included in the hardware. But even if they are listed within the 30 items, they are not included in the 15 that was mentioned earlier. In addition, something like the off-site center that was mentioned, it's not included even in the 30 items. The basic idea is that for those things which are going to take time, you're going to ask them to make plans on part of the operators, or you would formulate the plans. And as long as you commit in formulation of the plan, it's okay to restart the power plant. Is that your position? We are not saying that the hardware can be delayed because it takes time. At TEPCO Fukushima Daiichi, there has been an accident as a result of the earthquake and the fuel. Can we avoid the damage to the fuels? And that is used as a yardstick as what we would like to avoid, which is represented in criteria 1 and 2 respectively. In criteria 3, as for the point you've mentioned, this is incorporated into the plan which is to be launched in the future. When Mr. Hirose was here the other day, this is what he said. At the off-site center, based upon the accident of JCO, they are assuming the accident more or less the same level as the accident that has taken place at JCO. That's why the off-site center was located as to where it is actually was located. So they have not assumed that there would be the damage as experienced this time. This time out, there has been some tsunami countermeasures that you have formulated. And if that is true, there would not have been any damage to the core. If there is no damage to the core, then there shall be no release of radioactive substances to the outside, so that the off-site center can be located in a distance 10 kilometers away, and you consider that to be fully functional if it's located at 10 kilometers off. If the existing off-site center are not going to be functional, then some measures will be necessary at some point or the other. Therefore, we need to secure a different location for the off-site center. In regard to Oi nuclear power plant, which is the focus of attention, the off-site center is located relatively close, so there is a possibility of being affected. On the other hand, in the Tsuruga district, there's another off-site center. So if you cannot use that off-site center, there will be an alternative off-site center that could be used. And for the seismic buildings, seismic-proof buildings, we are looking at whether there are other buildings that could replace them. And for number 3 and number 4 units in the central control rooms, so long as electricity supply is secured, there will be air conditioning system, and there will be less influence from the possibly external release of the radioactive substances. And that's what we are doing.
Let me clarify. The NISA is responsible for the establishment of off-site center. Yes, about off-site center, together with the local, the municipalities, we establish off-site center. If the event moves beyond the assumption, and if there is a damage of core and radioactive material is released, and off-site center becomes not operational and cannot be used elsewhere. So in that case, Mr. Fukano, who is the head of the NISA, is responsible for that. Yes, I think I have to assume responsibility for that. And it is quite strange. And if the tsunami happens, and you just inspect the damage to the core, and that is contained. So as far as that is contained, there are no other the countermeasures needed. That is contrary to the standard, the multiple defense, the system adopted in the rest of the world. And in order to prevent the loss of containment and also to prevent release of hydrogen, we have to take steps. And so for that reason, there is a criteria 3. And multiple protection, in order to restart, is it included in a precondition? And perhaps the first phase and second phase, and gradually the protection should be incorporated while you operate the plant. And currently, the multiple the protection system is used. And because of tsunami, the common cause that damaged the power source. And so we should have the multiple defense. And under the criteria 1 and 2, those steps are taken. So the concept and approach, I think it is not consistent. And as far as the contained, the first phase, the containment becomes successful, and the countermeasures against severe accidents and evacuation, they are not needed. I think that is contrary to the idea of the multiple the protection or multiple defense. And during the first phase, containment may fail, and for that reason, multiple hedges are used. And that means, in order to operate the nuclear reactor, that is a basic condition in the world. But while you set the conditions for restart, the assumption is there is no release of radiological material, and that multiple defense, we do not overlook that. And how to ensure the multiple defense in order to avoid the damage of core, that we strongly require from the operators. And the emergency the response system is a part of that. So multiple defense is important, but the multiple defense is not ensured. For that reason, I ask that question. If the multiple defense is destroyed, in order to minimize the damage or in order to prevent the severe accident, the measure should be taken even the threshold is broken. You have to minimize the damage. That is the purpose of multiple protection. And the multiplicity, there are different types of multiplicity. In order to not to lead to the next the phase, that we have a deeper defense. I think that is a part of multiple defense. And we should not satisfied with that only. And if the situation moves to the next phase, what should be done? So that is under the criteria 3. So we do not stop. And that's what you have to do right now, and should take place simultaneously. Your first assumption is that does not occur, and then as time goes, you slowly introduce the measures. That is not appropriate. And that is always the backup system ready in advance. And otherwise, while you're not able to protect the safety, you cannot be responsible. So backup, multiple defense should be incorporated from the beginning before we start. Otherwise, you cannot comply with the global standard. The global standard do not set up from the beginning, and if that is not implemented from the beginning, to stop the operation. No, that is not the case, even in the rest of the world. And the defense in depth, if we try to move ahead of defense in depth, starting from the newly installed the reactor, and then try to retroactively apply that to the older reactors. IAEA, the principle, can you explain that? I'm sorry, the safety principle itself, it's not available right now, but you talked about global standard. The global, the standard that you talked about, can you explain them? Because you already described them. That is a five-layer, the protection, five-layer defense. And you said the world does not follow. But if you say so, you have to describe the standard against which describe the case. And otherwise, when the head of the NISA said so, the people tend to believe that. So what is the real standard, the global standard? And the multiple defense means the slowly but steadily each country should implement the one after the other, and that is established as a global standard. Is my understanding right? I haven't looked at all the standards, so I'm not able to declare this solidly, that since you are the head of the NISA, and people are paying attention to your statement, and that is distributed through the simultaneous interpreting to the rest of the world. And without looking at the world standard, the here said that those measures implemented slowly, steadily, gradually. And if you say so, I think the people in the world tend to believe that.
With
regard to IAEA safety principle, it's not available, but core capture in the U.S. facility exists. I'm a scholar by training, and when I receive the questions which I could not understand or I could not answer, we try to evade. And rather than mystify the people, the five-layer, the defense that is shared throughout the world, everybody understands that. So defense in depth and five-layer defense, that is important. I think that is the shared understanding. And after first phase and second phase, second layer, then the severe accident does not occur. And then gradually and slowly you can introduce the measures. I think that does not meet the world standard. Since you are the head of the NISA, and if you give that statement, I think the people may think in the world that Japanese standard is different from the global standard or world standard. So can you just return to your own office to check this? So there was a mention about anti-seismic, the building or the vent with filter, and the necessity for that has been discussed. And about them, in the 30 measures, and about vent, ensure the independence of vent piping and the impact on the environment should be minimized. And they are included in the 30 measures that you explained to us. are they included in the 15 measures adopted by the government? Why you need support from your subordinate? You already explained that to us. In a criteria 3, on page 10 of handout, at the time of accident and natural disaster, at the time of emergency, the communication facility reliability must be ensured. So the command site, the function should be enhanced. So it is part of 30 measures. But according to for the ministers, the 3 criteria that presented by them, those conditions should not be met at the time of restart. And as far as the plan to incorporate that for future is submitted, restart is allowed.
In regard to anti-seismic major buildings, you said it's necessary at the outset to fulfill the condition. When was the first time that you came to that conclusion on part of NISA? It was at the time of Chuetsu earthquake, in which the office building were severely damaged. As a result of that, we have introduced this concept. The office building, was that affected by the tsunami or the earthquake? No, by earthquake. So you were not able to get inside the building, right? And where was the command post placed as a result? In the end, we did use the office building, not at the very end, but immediately thereafter. Where did you relocate the command post? Immediately thereafter, as where the command post was located, I don't remember. Immediately thereafter, it was placed at the parking lot outside using the whiteboard, and you felt that was not sufficient. And should there be release of the radioactive substances, people working at the parking space would be radiated. So we have experienced that kind of facility is not good enough as the relocation of the command post. That's why it was said that anti-seismic and highly anti-seismic command posts would be required. Yes, that's how I understand as where it started. And not because there was no major anti-seismic building, it's not going to be good enough should there be no command to be issued from there. Thus, we felt that there was a meeting room next to the central control room, which could be used. That space is underground, correct? I don't remember which floor it's placed. It is in the underground floor. So should there be tsunami, there's a possibility of being inundated, so that space would not be usable. And you said that the cause was tsunami. In that sense, should there be tsunami, that space would be unavailable because it would be submerged in water. That's why it was said that you would relocate to the 4th floor, right? And have you checked the seismic nature of the 4th floor space? Let me confirm the location of the central command center or the central control center. Based upon the floor plan, it seems that the control room is not underground, but rather, is that for OI? Yes. This is placed in a position 26 meters above the seawater. So what about the seismic nature of that space? This building is assured a seismic to satisfy the S class, so I believe it's a seismic. Here we talk about having had the experience of accident at TEPCO. This is what's been compiled by TEPCO in the report they've issued. If this space was not available, it would have been impossible to continue with launching the countermeasures. Therefore, they have concluded that it is extremely important to have the anti-seismic main buildings. When we carried out the hearing of TEPCO people, this was the opinion of everybody. So everybody voiced that thanks to the guidance received by NISA after experiencing Chuetsu earthquake, they created this so that they didn't have to go to the parking space because with the whiteboard, and they won't be able to do anything because they shall be irradiated. So in that sense, this countermeasure was valued to be extremely important, and we have concluded that this is extremely important as a result of our evaluation. Chuetsu earthquake. As a result of Chuetsu earthquake, you've given guidance only to TEPCO? No, not necessarily only to TEPCO. For other power companies have come up with the anti-seismic Chugoku and Shikoku Chubu, as well as Shikoku Electric as well. But what about others? It's not been decided. You've provided the guidance, and if everybody followed the guidance at that time, then it would have been completed. This building was completed the year before the accident. So if you have given guidance at the same timing, everybody would have the same facilities, and there are many power plants without these facilities. So that because there was insufficient guidance, we have experienced what we have. Is that not true? It's true that we should have been more stringent in providing the guidance. Some power plants don't have this facility, and that's not the responsibility of the operator, but rather insufficient guidance provided by NISA. Naturally, we should have been more stringent to give the guidance so that it will be executed sooner. But if these facilities are not available, what should be done instead? We have tried to confirm that so that if you have the space that would have countermeasures against radiation exposures, that would be necessary, and that's how we are going about at this moment. This is Fukushima Daiichi, and this was prior to establishment of the anti-seismic main building as to where the office space was located. It looks like this before that. And if, let's say, the command post was located here, there would be no choice but to go outside because you won't be able to go inside the building, and this space would not be functional either, if that is true. As all the people at TEPCO had said, they appreciated the fact that there was the main anti-seismic building. The photograph speaks for itself, does it not? I have visited the site, and I believe I do have the understanding of the importance of these facilities. And because we had that anti-seismic building at Fukushima Daiichi, it was possible to launch the measures that were necessary. But on the other hand, are there no other facilities as an alternative? We looked at whether there would be other available space in the vicinity, and that's been confirmed whether that space will be usable. And for the time being, that alternative space will be used if there is no anti-seismic building available. The similar issue can be raised in regard to the vents with filters. Vents. All the Japanese understand if you do the venting, the radioactive substances will be released as a result, as all the Japanese people know. There was no choice, but even to release the radioactive substances, it was necessary to protect the reactor. But should there have been filter in the venting, we would have been able to lessen the contamination. And why don't you set that as one of the preconditions? Severe accident countermeasures were not sufficient. as launched by NISA, in which we are reflecting that it was not satisfactory. But as for the points as required by the law, there are things which have not been implemented. But in case of OE, this is not BWR, but the pressurized type instead. So that even with this set of countermeasures, it's not that the primary air cooling system will be, the air will be released immediately from the primary system, but rather from the secondary. So at that point, because there shall be no release of the radioactive substances, because it's not primary, but rather secondary cooling water system. In regard to the third criteria, I would say very many important points are incorporated in the third criteria. And in regard to Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plants, we are verifying some of the lessons. And all the lessons which we consider to be important are left in the hands of the operators because they are included in criteria 3. And the priority is appreciated by NISA because it's included in the 30 items, but they don't need to be in place prior to the restart of the operation as decided by the 4 ministers. You said that these efforts are in parallel with the restart of the operation. Some of the important measures, including severe accident countermeasures, as well as measures in regard to evacuation, as well as measures for the off-site, are not included in the 30 items. The schedules are not clear as a result, and we have no way of knowing what's the linkage between these and the restart of the power plants. And that's how the standards have been set forth at present. But let's assume that you leave these matters in the hand of the operators in regard to criteria 3. And if these are to be accepted, is it true to understand that you can trust that they shall be carried out by the operators?
The ministers put great emphasis on that point. And to use those criteria, try to move forward the schedule as much as possible. But in addition to that, every quarter, the progress is monitored whether operators are able to meet the criteria. That needs to be checked. And if they fail to do so, the evaluation under the criteria 3 must be changed. So the who is evaluator? NISA acts as evaluator. In any case, we have to perform the role to monitor that with the order coming from minister. What is basis, legal basis upon which you monitor that? As I said, on the standards, that is the beyond the legal requirement. And if the new the bill the passes to be established as a law, and before that we use administrative guidance. So even though those are not observed, there is no the penalty. And so criteria 1 to 3, they are not a legal requirement. They should be taken as administrative guidance. I believe that that is quite unlikely. And if you require the report about the meeting criteria, even though false report is given, there is no penalty imposed on operators. No, there is no penalty imposed on operators, but should it happen, we make every effort to confirm the report is true. And is there the on-site inspection? There is the safety inspection and also inspection the study. So since your administrative agency, your action is always based on law. If there is no legal requirement, you do not have the authority to conduct inspection. There is a resident inspector to check the activities of operators. So with their activity, we are able to monitor the progress. And in addition to that, there is the way through the hearing. to check the operator's activities. You said that the schedule should be moved forward as much as possible. But even though the operator says that they will move forward the schedule, but then there is a chance that that is delayed. What kind of actions or penalties you take? If there is a major delay from the originally promised timing, we will have to give guidance, and we have to check with operator. And if there is no rectification, in that case, we have to remind them. If the criteria 3 is not met, the operation is suspended. There is no legal authority to suspend the operation, so we should actually give guidance. And anti-seismic back check, you instructed the operators to follow that. Was that legal requirement? And the seismic back check, that was not legal requirement either. That is a part of administrative guidance. So they are very similar. And the seismic back check, was that implemented as NISA expected? Unfortunately, the schedule was delayed. And in Fukushima Daiichi, the anti-seismic back check was implemented already. Partly that was conducted and reached the stage of the provisional, the evaluation stage, but not all. Did you give proper guidance to improve the situation? When I was a Deputy Director General, the NISA actually gave the reminder to the TEPCO to quicken the pace. But that guidance was not enough for them to implement the back check thoroughly. So you expect that be done by operator. And if the worst the case happens again, of course, in order to prevent the explosion of the reactor, the action is necessary. But vent gives adverse impact on the health of people who live around the plant. And so I think it is quite natural for people to expect that the tool to minimize the damage on health should be incorporated. And that should be included in criteria 3. But that is not implemented by operator. What kind of action you will take? If without any good reason, if the action is delayed, that means does not meet the criteria 3. And in terms of law, that is a part of administrative guidance. But we will give probably the stricter the guidance for the operator to do that. We have to actually extend the session by 15 minutes. And I think the answer now was quite clear. That is administrative the guidance. But if the operator tells a lie, or if the third the criteria is delayed, in that case, there is a chance that the reactor operation is stopped. So if there is any internal manipulation, and even though officially they say do it, but they do not conduct fulfill the promise, if that situation is observed, you take the action to suspend the operation of reactor. And of course, prior to that, we have to look at the process. But if depending upon the case, I think there is a chance, likelihood that we ask them to suspend the reactor operation. That is not legal requirement, but I think there would be the counter argument from the operator. What authority will allow the NISA to do so? And the stress test is also the administrative guidance. So within that framework, we carry out the measures. And with that understanding, if the operators fail to take actions, they have to ready for the stoppage of the reactor operation. And I spent the too long time, but if I just summarize my impression, having listened to the remarks of the witness, we analyzed the cause of the accident at the commission. And not only the situation pertaining to the reactor, for instance, if the offsite center could have functions better, the damage could be the smaller, or if there had been the vent with the filter, the damage could have been the minimized. So those are the lessons that we need to reflect for the operation for the future generations. But you just picked up the part of the entire the picture, and you narrow down the causes. And as long as you clear and overcome those difficulties, then you allow the restart of the plant operation. And what is the rationale of doing so? And because you can accumulate the expertise and knowledge. And so the things that you can do should be put in practice. And I think that seems to be a better approach. And as you said, not only tsunami, but earthquake may cause the damage. So if that is a possibility, the anti-seismic back check or anti-seismic strengthening, reinforcement, that can be the part of the minimum requirement in order to regulate the operators. But you do not take that approach. Why? Can you describe the reason you do not take that approach? I do not know whether I can answer that question, but about technological or technical the knowledge based on the disaster last year, there are many lessons we learned. And reflecting that lesson, the technical knowledge is just a part of that. And we have conducted the hearings, and we tried to make evaluation based on that process. And about disaster prevention that you talked about, although it does not take the form of report, and together with NSC, based on the lesson we learned how to improve the structure, we put together the report and try to move forward the schedule.
In regard to the restart process, the 3 ministers last year have agreed to it. And as a result, the stress test was to be carried out. The first round of stress tests was carried out, which would be used in order to come to the judgment whether the restart is allowed or not. The second round is to carry out the comprehensive evaluation. This is the overall framework in which activities have been carried out. Maybe I didn't ask the question in the right manner. Just another point. In regard to all the safety-related countermeasures, you look into it, and what can be incorporated should be incorporated so as to restart the nuclear power plant. That's one thought, I would say. But on the other hand, there would be another position or another sets of values which would not agree with the first thoughts in coming out with these criteria. The other factor is that there could be shortage of electricity generated, which would pose harmful effects to the economy. Is that the factor in the second part? There are things which need to be heeded in terms of safety, and what is to be judged in the end is decided by the 4 ministers as issued in the document. However, we would evaluate what kind of preconditions are being met. And we have presented that. But ultimately, it was a decision by the politicians as what they have determined as ministers. That's politics, ordinarily, I would say, isn't it? There is some factors on one side, which is to be balanced with safety. And because there's necessity, even if there are some slight anxiety, there needs to be restart of the power plant. That's a political decision. And that's different from your scientific knowledge. NAIIC should talk about safety comes first. Isn't that true? Because if you look at safety, NAIIC should say that you should talk about all the ideals as how to assure the safety and say that these are the standards to be met. And then it may be that the politicians would not accept that. Isn't that true as how you should go about? NAIIC has come out with 30 items as well as other measures, so that as long as these measures are taken, we should not see the reoccurrence of what we have experienced this time. And we presented that, and they were decided by the ministers. So you felt that the 30 items are essential. Is that true? 30 items are things which need to be done in any case. NAIIC, from the perspective and position of NAIIC, you presented with 30 items. You wanted all the 30 items to be met before the restart of the nuclear power plant. Is that true? Is that the position of NAIIC? Looking at the phenomena, we have come to understand what items are necessary. NAIIC's position was 30 items, but is it true to understand that the politicians reduced them to 15 items? But there's also the framework for the stress test, on the other hand. And to what extent do you need to implement to avoid the reoccurrence? We tried to summarize that and presented that to the ministers. Let me summarize. Even 30 items are not sufficient, as repeated many times. I think there should be 40 or even 50 items. But the very fact that you have focused on the 30 items, to us, from our perspective, it's narrow and not sufficient. But at least we wanted 30 items to be presented. But now you've only picked up 15 items which have been met at this point. You are the regulatory body as NAIIC. So you have traded off safety and other factors. And although you might have some anxiety, the decision was made to restart the power plant. That's a decision on part of the politicians. But NAIIC should take the position as a regulatory body who wanted all the 30 items to be observed and implemented. Based upon the accident, we summarized the lessons learned, and these are the 30 items as being mentioned many. And because of the tsunami and the earthquake that we have experienced, there was a suspension of the power supply. And we also summarized as what needs to be done. They have been presented. I understand that. We understand that. You are the Director General of NAIIC. You are not to come up with a political decision or judgment. Why don't you say that clearly and explicitly? As a DG of NAIIC, you should say these are the items that need to be implemented. Whether it's going to be done in reality or not is something that's to do with politicians. And that's what Mr. Nomura is saying. You say that the safety of the public is important. And that's what the politicians want you to say as NAIIC. Based upon it. Okay, as Dr. Misev has said, do you have the independence from politics? Do you have the independence from the operators? Dr. Misev has said those independence and autonomy are important. Are you speaking by assuring that kind of autonomy and independence despite the fact that we've gone through this? What is your position? In any case, I shall be repeating myself, but we have evaluated this accident and considered what can be done. That was the basics. What should be done? Why don't you say what should be done? Okay, what should be done are these 30 items. So you were involved from the establishment of NAIIC. And is it true to understand that there is no progress from the start of NAIIC, although you head NAIIC at present? We have carried out the technical considerations in line with the nuclear power plant. And based upon the information and capability that's available, we believe that all what is possible. As DG of NISA, what is important is to implement that to the extent possible. If the politicians decide that NISA can come up with any kind of criteria as NISA wishes, how many items would you have come up with? The restart is an issue of the different dimension. I'm asking about the restart. Let's say the politicians would say to you, you don't have to consider other factors, but based upon this experience, what is the minimum that's necessary to be implemented? And they need to be done in total. If that is the direction from the politicians, and if they direct you to come up with the standard for the restart of the power plants, how many items would you have come up with? It's a hypothetical question, so it's difficult for me to respond. However, as the knowledge acquired from this accident, the countermeasures to be taken up are incorporated in the 30. So it's 30, right? 30 items. But there was a political decision made in which it was decided to be 15 instead. And NISA felt that this was a political decision, so that you have felt that you had to go along with the decisions rendered by the politicians. We came up with 30 on our part. And at Fukushima Daiichi, in order to avoid the reoccurrence of what has happened, we would like to avoid the damage to the fuel and looked at what's necessary to be done and have come up with the criteria. The last resort for you to resist is to assure your independence from the politicians, which you need to present to the Japanese public. And you need to say that the politicians didn't even take up 30, but they focused on the 15 instead, and they came to the conclusion. And the politicians need to explain to the public why they only selected 15, because the politicians have feared the possible shortage of electricity. So if you look at all the factors as a balance, the politicians have said that they have taken this decision they have taken. But NISA should have asserted that you wanted 30 as a minimum. Isn't that the position you should show to the public? If you look at the bottom of this document, it was decided by the politicians in the end. But we have provided with the basics so as to avoid at the minimum the damage to the fuel system. We understand that, but the decision by the administrative body is different from that of the politician, which is something that we didn't understand before. Fukushima Daiichi was mentioned. What about the top of Fukushima Daiichi at the moment as NISA? I think they are in a very difficult and tough position at present. There is the recirculating water system in which they would filter the water and reuse it. And there are lots of provisional facilities. So the situation is quite tough at Fukushima Daiichi. To the extent possible, we should change them to permanent facilities as soon as possible. And we have instructed the operators. Instruction? What about number 4, the spent fuel? For the pool for the number 4 unit, this is the source of great concerns to many. We have premised ourselves to the fact that it's damaged and looked at a seismic nature and tried to confirm to what extent it's a seismic. But to be doubly sure, we are asking them to reinforce it.
The day before yesterday, and the Senator Roy Wayne from Oregon visited the site, and he said that it was the source of great concern. That message was conveyed to Madam Clinton. So looking from outside, once the earthquake occurred, how it would happen, what would happen. And for instance, of the Sumatra, another big earthquake occurred recently. So the priority of the work undertaken by the NISA, how to stabilize the plant, the Fukushima, in order to make it stable condition, and that is the top priority, the task. So please do so. And we ran out of time. We had the head of the NISA, Mr. Terasaka, and all of them said the quality of the staff members and the awareness have changed since you are the head of the NISA. And after the disaster last year, whenever opportunity arises, I directly communicate with the staff members of the NISA what is the basic principle upon which our organization is operated. That is quite evident, and all the tasks done by the staff member is very difficult, but I think they do their utmost. So you are the safety regulator, so you don't have to make any political decision. And so that's what you have to communicate to the staff members. Otherwise, very difficult to change your mindset. And I'm not advocating the non-nuclear power, but if you have to restart the nuclear power plant somewhere, and the earthquake and tsunami, and you really have to consider different factors. Which plant do you think is the safest in order to convince the public? Number one, number two, number three. Which the power plant is the safest? And for instance, backcheck is implemented, and there is the history of earthquake. And so which the power plant it is safest to restart? So do you have any the order or sequence which the plant is the safest to restart? And without solid evaluation, I should not say anything without clear rationale. So if you consider the safety standard as the safety regulator, what is the order? If you can just share with us, not now, but in near future, that we appreciate. And if you can convince the public, I think there are the reasons for that. And I think the reasons are necessary to ensure the safety. So, for instance, you can use parameters to conclude that. So in that sense, the measures. But in order to enhance the safety, rather than talking about restart, in order to enhance the safety, the 30 measures are necessary. So including the check, by the end of this week, can you just come up with the order which the power plant is the safest? And as far as we make evaluation, this is the same for stress test. We have to look at data rigorously, and we have to visit the field. And without the process, we cannot hastily reach the conclusion which the nuclear power plant is the safest for restart. And unless the data and records come in, and very difficult for us to give you any the deadline for that. Well, it could be pending, but I hope that you will make efforts toward that goal. And from our position, without any evaluation, we are not able to give you the order of the safety. But since you're experts, and unless you make recommendation, the things would not progress. May not be the final conclusion. And without evaluation and study, we cannot hastily conclude which the nuclear plant is the safest. But I think routinely you have to study that, because otherwise it's very difficult to change the political decision. So I think that position and stance are important. Yes, we should be flexible, try to think about many things flexibly. if the political decision is enormously off the mark, off the point, can you check that and stop that? And we make evaluation. And in July, the three ministers agreed. And based on that agreement, the evaluation method is established, therefore, should not be totally off the mark or off the point. So internally, evaluation is made. Not yet, evaluation is not completed. Only the Unit 3 and 4 of OE, and then is completed, and Ikata. But other power plants, the evaluation is yet to be made. So unless you make evaluation prior to the political decision, if the political decision is wrong, since you're a regulatory agency, you cannot fulfill your mission. And I thought that you already completed your evaluation about the safety of the power plant, but it is not the case. The stress test up to the Unit 3 of Ikata, and for other power plants, evaluation is yet to be made. So since you are concerned about the power supply, the safest one should, if a restart is needed, the safest one should be restarted the first. But you haven't made any evaluation yet. And the stress test is put in place. And unless all the requirements are cleared, the restart is impossible. So all the stress test requirements must be met. And the primary, the requirement must be met under the stress test. And not only specific parts of the stress test, but all the stress test requirements must be met in order to enable the restart. No, that is not the case. Stress test, the primary the evaluation is conducted for each reactor. And after the stress test is completed, and we have to evaluate against the standard set by the 4 ministers. And if there is no problem, we'll be able to allow the restart. So the safest one may not be chosen as a result. And about anti-seismic building, importance is well recognized by us. Thank you very much. We have extended the time for this session. And Mr. Fukano, thank you very much for coming. And thank you very much for describing your position as a head of the NISA. Since you have been involved in NISA since its foundation, you know the history. And now you play the role under the great difficulty, under the big stress. But thank you very much for attending as the expert witness today. Thank you.
次回の委員会はですね、4月の21、22日に開催。
And the next the meeting will held on 21st and the 22nd of April, and Minami and Okuma, the area, we have a town meeting in order to look at the opinions of the residents at the Nihonmatsu and Aizu Wakamatsu. Thank you very much. And the session is over.
メディアの方にご連絡いたします。記者会見
Announcement to the media. The press conference would start a little later than scheduled. The press conference would start at 8:45 in the same room. 8:45. Thank you.